Good morning. The goal of today's presentation is to teach you how to create a detailed drawing, including sectional views, of a relatively complicated looking part. On the screen you'll see the dryer gear. That's our class project. It's got 72 teeth. That's what the 72 means. And we've got the actual model on the right side. I am using Solidworks 2019 to demonstrate how to do this. The dimensions are not visually clear, so we will have to make some assumptions and make sure we make notations in our detail drawing so that our customer will review it for approval. First thing you do is when you're in your model, you can go ahead and make drawing from part assembly at the top, or if you prefer the pull down option, you can go to SolidWorks, File, Make Drawing from Part. That's up to you. So in my case, I do have a template. I did do a video on how to make a template. It's a 7-minute video. You can go check it out. So I'm using my template. I hit OK. And as my template opens up, I'm going to maximize this so I can show you what it looks like. It is a title block that's not imposing. It does automatically take in the drawing name as its drawing number, so please be aware of that. To the right, you'll have the different views that you can drag into your detail drawing. To the left, you'll see your sheet, annotation, information. So whatever you choose to drop in first, it's your call. I'm going to go ahead and drop in front view. It is real tiny, so I don't like it being that small. I'm going to go ahead and change the sheet properties. So instead of being quarter scale, let's make it, let's try with half and see what happens. Half scale. Okay, so there's our half scale. The default setting in SolidWorks is to not show hidden lines, so be aware of that. This particular view would not benefit from hidden lines anyways, so it's okay that there aren't any. If we turned on hidden lines, you'll see the only thing it'll show are all the hidden lines of the different gears behind these. So I'm just going to leave that off to make the drawing, this particular view, clean, and just let that be. Now, as far as other views are concerned, we can go ahead and go back to view layout and project view and drop in a top view. Okay. And then as far as a side view, I don't think the side view is going to do that much for us. We're going to throw in an isometric view and hit OK. Everything we're doing is in third angle projection, just a word of caution on that. So because it's an inch drawing, that's why we're using third angle projection. So we have our two views. Everything looks good. Our center lines over here do not extend past the part. They should. That's always the best way to represent that information. So we do want to pull those center lines out. These are actually attached to each other. They're referenced to each other. So those center lines should extend out a bit so that you know that they're part of the same family. So when you detail this, you'll know, oh, and the little outside lines should stand out so that when you put in your dimension lines, they don't extend into the part. These are drafting standard rules that we're trying to apply in SolidWorks. So keep that in mind. So that way we make a neat drawing, because a drawing is of little value to the customer without the details. And if our details are sloppy, it's also going to reflect on what our quality of production is as a business. So it's important to show well-represented drawings. I'm going to pull all this up, pull these out. Okay. Now you start seeing the drawing is going to get a little complicated now because we're adding a lot of content to this. The top view could have hidden lines, but it's not going to really benefit that view either. if we go ahead and start throwing in dimensions now, the first thing you want to do is not put in your own dimensions, so you don't use Smart Dimension. You really want to use the dimensions from the model, so you pick model items. You don't want to select feature, we're going to select the entire model. You do want to turn everything on. Reminder, these two toggle back and forth. Okay, just remember that. The rest we don't put in there, so we don't worry about that. When you hit OK, because you picked the entire model, the dimensions drop everywhere. You're going to notice now this model is getting busy. Very, very busy. So it's dimensionally challenging to look at. This is not what you turn in as your class assignment. It's a big no-go, so you don't do that. You actually do have to clean this drawing up. Remember, the dimension settings are set into the template. So, and if you forgot where to set everything up, you go into your system options, make sure you go to document properties, and make sure to go to all your settings for dimensions and make sure all your settings are set. The only thing I would recommend to change on is make sure to use an arrow style of open. Your gaps are fine. Your beyond dimension line, all of these things you have to change. Best that you change them up front and incorporate them into the template rather than having to manually adjust every single time you do a drawing. So we've got a lot of dimensions on here. Things are going to get very confusing. See that? So this is an example of where the drawing gets a little too busy, but you don't necessarily want to change the scale to accommodate the dimensions, because then the customer won't be able to see the part. So there's always the competing two things. I need to show enough of the part so the customer can visually see what's going on, but it can't be such a mess that again the customer can't see what's going on. And this is where we do different types of detail, sectionals and detailed views. Okay, we remove a section, broken out. All these different types of elements exist for the purpose of drawings that get very busy and complicated. So what we're going to do is make some changes. The first thing I'm doing is identifying what can stay. The 2-inch dimension can stay, but its location for that extension line is a no-go. So we do have to move it. The way that you know you can move it, that endpoint, is you have to wait till you see that icon that you see on the screen. That way you can drag it all the way out. Those are the things that are important. You do not want your dimension literally interfacing with your part. It's actually a big no-go. It gets confusing from a user's perspective. What is what? This is allowed if you do this. This can be allowed as well, as far as that's concerned. The 72 sitting smack in the middle of everything is actually how many cuts, how many teeth there are. Okay? That is a number that I wish it would do differently, but it does not. So we're going to pull that off to the side and deal with that later. These dimensions are not logical in this view because you can't see what they're dimensioning. Always remember, you do not dimension something where you can't see it. Here's these two can be out here. This is dimensioning, of all things, this line, and it's visually difficult to identify that. So some people will say, well, how are we going to deal with that? Now you see this, see when I move this out here, what happens? This needs to pop inside. But then what happens? You see this gets messy. So how do we deal with that? This is an example of where you can pick a dimension and you can actually suppress one of its arrows. Okay? You actually can suppress one of its arrows. You have a choice of all the different lines. I gotta actually pull this out so I can look at this more. If I take this arrow and pop it in, you notice how it fights it in there? See that? Yeah, see, I can't really move it the way I want to, can I? So if I pop this arrow out, it's still in the way. Okay? So this is an example of where I would like to suppress that specific arrow on just that one side. When you look at dimensions over here, you've got value, you've got liters. See that? You have other, okay, where it's just information. Leaders, you see where a leader is, shows where it is, where the different arrow, what it's going to look like. How do you want it to appear inside, outside? Right now it's outside. If I click on this, it pops inside. Smart arrows will decide for you. I tend not to do that. Use document bend lines, extend bend, leader text. You think this is where you'd find your arrows. If you open this up, that's break lines, custom text position. You can do quite a bit of stuff. When you go to value, value is the content of the dimension. Okay? If you click on the dimension and your right mouse button, you have options to hide dimension line, reverse direction, driven, display options, smart dimension. If you go to display options, center dimension, offset, show parentheses, more dimensions, different types of dimensions, different types of line types, drawing views, tables, things of that nature. You do not have an option to simply hide arrow. What you do have is you can say hide dimension line. When you click on that option, that is what you're asking it to do. That's the language it's chosen to use. Now this dimension over here, you'd want to do the same thing. You'll notice I selected this side, right mouse button, hide dimension line. So when you say hide dimension line, it also means hide the arrow. Not intuitive, but I'm just making sure you understand where to find it. Then you can put the dimension back in, and now it's cleaner looking. Those are the things you want to achieve when you're doing a detailed drawing. You want it to look clean. If it doesn't look clean, a person can't see it, can't understand what you're trying to explain to them. It's not a good idea. So here's another example where I can pop this dimension out. If I put this dimension here, this gets confusing. This particular item, there's no clean spot to put that on that side, but you can drag it over onto this side. If you choose to do that, one of the things you're going to have to do is make sure your extension lines need to be out here. You'll notice I don't naturally want to move neatly to the same spot. That's one of the curses, there we go, of detailing that you have to deal with, but you just have to be patient and work through it. Here's this dimension, which is very difficult to make work. See that? You could drop it in there, but you can hardly see that dimension. This is not acceptable. You cannot leave a dimension in there like that. What you can do is you can identify that you want it to, of all things, extend out as a leader. If you can do that, and then again, leaders, see it says use extend text. If I remove that, then I can drag you. Nope, still won't let me do it. Yeah, stuck in there. Used document bend line. I'm going to remove that and then drag you. Nope, still can't do that. So let's see, I'm going to change it to this. Yeah, still can't do that. Extension line, we're going to remove that. Let's see if I can extend it. Still can't do what I want. Your goal right now is to be able to move this dimension out neatly. If it's not easy to do with the option that you have, you could tell I turned in a whole bunch of options and I'm still not able to do anything. I can pick custom text position and then see if it'll let me do anything, which it won't, because the choices are solid leader, aligned text, broken leader, horizontal text, broken leader, aligned text. None of those fit the profile of what I'm trying to do. Break lines, it doesn't work. If I break extension lines, break dimension lines, if I click on this option and drag this out, see, it doesn't do what you think it might do. So there's no clean option in here. So there are other ways to do it, but for the sake of time, because they're not going to pay you to sit there and detail this forever, you do have to accept some limitations, whether you like it or not. Usually I just drag the dimension in. There's ample room to put it inside. That way it's clean. One can argue You have enough information here to deduce that, but no, the customer wants to see every single dimension, so this is stacked. That's how they want it to be presented, so you just go with it. So this view is set. This particular element right here, see that? That one is tough. You know, you can drag it in a little closer, but yeah, we're following that, the annoyance of saying, hey, I've intersected the part to show this. If I drag my dimension out here, it will visually not make any sense what it's dimensioning to. And that is probably the best reason for why. If I put it out here, see, it's not clear what it's dimensioning to. One can argue this should really be under here. Under here, though, is very difficult to see because I can't put the arrows beneath it. So that is the reason this is hanging out here. So there are some exceptions to the rule, as with everything else, where you are basically stuck having to leave this dimension line extended into the part this way. So I would just drag it a little closer so it's clearly identifying what it's dimensioning. Hopefully the line weight thicknesses are correct, that you've set those. If not, again, go back to your settings, system options, into your document properties, make sure that you've identified your different line thicknesses. If you have, you're set. If not, then that will definitely be a concern. This now is cleaned up. The top view is a mess. You can drag you have elements in the top view that you pull dimensions off that were visible in the front view. We'll deal with that in a minute. This dimension looks good. The reason it came out beautifully like that, 4x with 0.500 through, is because back into the detail, into the model itself. Okay, remember, if you look at the model, everything you do in the model, I'll just show you right here, whatever you do in here directly translates here. So I use the whole wizard. See that? I use the whole wizard, and because I used it, it goes ahead and takes care of dimensioning. Now, of course, we have to take into account the fact that dimensioning needs to be per the customer's expectations. So right now, everything in the drawing is showing to 3 decimal places. Is that what the customer showed on their drawing? Nope, they showed to 2 decimal places. Appreciate the reality that decimal places directly correlates to cost, because the more decimal places you have on a drawing, that means the greater tolerance, higher tolerance expectations, which equates to more expensive. So your goal is to not make your job harder, or your manufacturing floor's job harder, by putting in more decimal places than are necessary. So those of you doing detailed drawings at a company, appreciate that the number of zeros at the end of your numbers actually matters, just like they do in our paychecks. And if you add too many zeros, you're going to mess up your paycheck. That's the simplest way to phrase that. So you would need to change your settings to reflect on your document properties the decimal places that the customer is willing to purchase at, which is 2 decimal places. Because if you give them something better, they'll pay for it, but they won't pay for it. Meaning that they'll be like, yeah, the drawing's great, go ahead and make it. Well, you made all the work for yourself, because you made the drawing to 3 decimal places, so now you're stuck to that tolerance. Don't do that to yourself. It's a very expensive mistake. So now I went ahead and these dimensions are already on the drawing. Okay, so I left these in. And they can stay there. That's okay. They can stay there. Obviously, where you have a big mess is right here with the keyway. So this cannot be like this. So what you end up having to do is those dimensions you gotta remove, because there's not much you can do with them. So this you can leave. This you can leave. There isn't a clear spot to identify how many teeth, so we're going to make that a note. What you can do is you can take the 72 that's sitting here, see how it's so dim right there, and you can actually say number of teeth, all in caps. Okay, you can have it as a note. And spell out N-O, that's okay. And you could leave it at that. That way at least the number is still being used. I forgot to put a little, yeah, that's not what I wanted. I have to put a little space right there, so it looks nice and neat. Okay, so you can leave that note right there, or right under. Now we can't do it underneath only because we're about to add some dimensions there. So we'll just put it right there. So the dimensions that are missing are the dimensions of the whole configuration. So you will have to put those in. Again, you're not going to be using Smart Dimension. What you're going to do is use Model Item. Always use Model Item. And now, instead of selecting everything, you're just going to select Features. So you're going to select in this view, and you're going to hit OK. No model items are inserted. Choose yes. Okay, so I'll say yes. And there it goes. Wow, they're in there. They're hard to see, but they're in there. So now, the job is to clean up the drawing again. You cannot leave this and think it's acceptable. The answer is no, it's not. These diameters are clearly visible up here. Some of them, not all of them. So you could drop the ones that are clearly visible. That one is not. Okay, and yeah, there's another one that's not clearly visible. So the 1.63, we're going to take that one. We're going to leave that one, but we're going to take out the 1.6 because it's hard to see it. We're going to take out the 1.38. The diameter 4 is visible. This is visible. This dimension is not logical in that view. So we're going to remove that because we don't really know what that's pointing to. So I'm going to pull this out. Okay. So what's missing now? To go back to this view, we can go ahead and pick in model items again, import into just this one view. So there you go. That dimension's missing. And this dimension, there we go. See that? Those are brought in and hit OK. So now we see diameter 3. 1 and 3 it's in, sorry. And we see diameter 1.6. Now what do we notice? We're crashing into each other. The top view and the front view are now interfering with each other. So now we can try to tuck this up a bit and see what we could do. These diameters don't have to be there, but they can be shoved over to here. See? So don't feel the need. But you must have the dimension in an exact position. This is what you do with every single drawing. You just have to make adjustments. Okay? So these dimensions are here. What is missing in the top view is hidden lines. There, hidden lines make sense. So we throw them in. Okay, we're going to hit save, by the way. Always hit save, save, and save often. And it's going to save wherever the detail drawing, the model is by default. That's what it wants to save it. Okay, so we've got a good set of dimensions on here. We are missing some. Here's an example of a dimension with a missing leader. Not exactly sure why its leader is missing. So if I click on this, go to leaders. Use document display. Use document display. Hit OK. For some reason, it doesn't want to show the leader. So let's see. Display options. Let's see what's going on in here. Center, show pixels, center dimension. For some odd reason, the leader doesn't want to show. But one way I can deal with this, because this dimension is too center, is I can put in a center line by picking center line under annotation and picking the side walls of my center circle. See that? hit OK, and if I extend this through the object, by default, I'm giving it a meter. There we go. So that is my solution to an odd result. The other problem still exists, though. We are going to run out of room, because there's only so much I can do to put dimensions here, to put dimensions there. So I think we're going to have to change the scale. So instead of half scale, we're going to have to go a little smaller. So if you go up here to sheet format, right mouse button, properties, instead of half scale, I'm going to pick 3/8, which is right below, an eighth smaller, and apply the change. See that? Everything does get moved, so you do have to make adjustments now again. It's the nature of the beast, but now you have space, which is nice. For some reason, that one dimension. There we go. So you're going to have to pull out dimensions out a little bit. Number of teeth. You can put a note or just say number of teeth. That's up to you. This view looks pretty reasonably decent. Oh, we do have a problem. See this dimension? The arrows are popping out, so you gotta just click on them to pop them in. Not sure why it chose to do that, but it did. These guys, gotta move them up a little bit. Their diameters, so they're doing about all you can do with these two. This, for some reason, oh, I know why. Their extension lines decided to stay all the way out there. That's where they were originally. I still don't want to go 1/8 of an inch away, which is nicer, so you just deal with it. Don't want it on top of the part. But you don't want it too far away. So for now, I left them there. This, I could probably pop it inside. Yeah, so it looks a little better. This, I can't really pop it inside just because it's too tight. You can, but it's a visual thing. I'll leave it there. So. No, I can't. I have to put it inside. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. As you can tell, your decision for where you put things is very subjective. And I want you to be aware of that. So anytime a student asks me, well, is this okay or is that okay? And I'll tell them it's up to you. You have a degree of subjectivity that you can apply. So the no-nos, let me try to pop that, there we go. The no-nos are if you dimension something you cannot see. You can't do that in any view. You really need to be mindful of that. That's why the 1.06 dimension needs to be down here instead of up there. We do have other dimensions missing though, and they should be coming in from the model item, but for some reason they're not. So I'm going to have to manually see if I can bring them in. For some reason they don't want to come in. So if I pick the view, I'll say okay, let's see what happens. Yeah, the only thing it wants to bring in is this. And that we're going to deal with separately. So the dimension that I'm looking to bring in is the spacing of the holes. If I bring them in by myself intentionally in this manner, I will end up having to put them in manually. If you put them in manually, what you're going to find out is those dimensions appear. Oh, that's absolutely horrible to do that. I will not do that. I'll dimension it up here. Okay. you'll notice what I'm reacting to is overlapping dimensions. It's another no-no. We don't do that. So I'm putting this dimension out here. So that it does not interfere with the other dimension. So that's acceptable. Doing something like that is acceptable. Pop the arrows in. Double click on that. Sorry. There we go. Or single click. And then I'm going to have to put in a secondary dimension from this side to this side. That's a reference dimension. That looks decent. It's a busy drawing. That's the nature of this drawing. It's a busy drawing. I'll take this view, drag it down just a little bit. This can stay right there. Okay, I'm going to move it out here. Right there. The last thing you need to account for... Oh, I'm missing a dimension. Before I move on, I need a dimension from here to here. Now I think we're good. And I may miss a dimension and you'll catch it and you'll fix it in your drawing, and I may miss it here in the video as I go through the general approach of how to dimension this. Okay, the last thing that does need to be accounted for is the teeth information. Best way to do this is with a detail view. Okay, see that? And then I put it all over there. Now, I'm going to hit OK. You don't want your A overlapping your numbers, so you do have to clock it over to some reasonable spot. Okay, that's number one. Number two, over here, this is where you have the opportunity to change the scale. And you can even go with parent scale, now it's too small. Sheet scale, it's the same. I'm going to go with 1:1. Why not? I've got a lot of room here to do that. This is the isometric that can be just pushed off to the side. Text here needs to be moved over. It's no big deal. And now this view is where you're dropping all your dimensions. So now you go back to annotation, click on model items, the view is selected. This is everything. Hit OK, you'll get the same error, say yes, and poof, there are the dimensions that it can drop into this view. What it dropped were the dimensions related to how this was physically made. So this still might not be good enough for what you need to identify on the dental, or I call it dental because it's teeth, on the dental work. So you will have to, I'm guessing, I'm about to do it right now. Put in a center line. See that? Put in a center line there. See that? So you can identify the most important feature of any tooth design, which is the angle between teeth. See that? You can, at this point, also, you see how this inner diameter, you can remove that dimension from there. And you can actually, I'm going to leave the 5.8 here, and just in this view, I'm going to pick model item and see if I can get just in that view, there, the radius, or the diameter of the only thing else gives me is that. So this is an example where you are forced to put in a manual dimension. Anything you put in manually appears as a light gray. Oh, it shows it as a diameter. So right mouse button. Come on. No, it won't let me. Nope, won't let me. I don't want it in as a radius, I want it in as a customer would imply. So I'm going to leave it as is instead. Sorry. And I am going to put that up here where it belongs, because that's where the customer had it. I'm going to hit OK. Yeah, I'm going to say yes. Yeah, that part is garbage. This is that inner diameter that I wanted to put into the detail. This is everything that I actually put in the detail, just taking them out. There we go. These I am moving up to get out of the way because it'll look better. Again, presentation matters. You don't want everything to look crowded. Okay, so with this particular drawing, it looks like I can literally get away with 2 detailed views, an isometric, and this. I do think we can almost change the scale on this and get it even larger, which is good. You want that. 2 to 1, perhaps. Nice. It's always good to show clearly to the customer what they're purchasing. In this case, it's a very odd tooth design because it's straight teeth. There's no curvature. And that actually is a big problem, and you will have to put a notation in your drawing. You can, if you want, to take this note. For example, we're going to move this over just a bit. Move that up out of the way. Okay. And we've got this note here. You can go over here, say note 1, number of teeth, and just leave that information in there. 2, customer to verify, tooth design. Okay. 3. Let's see. I think that was the biggest thing because the tooth design was the #1 thing we covered in class. Makes no sense how it looks. So, and then because we have 2 notes, we're going to make sure this is grammatically correct and say notes. And then we're going to hit, just click out here, OK. We're going to hit save, save, and save often, save, save, and save often. I'm going to move this over so it's in a reasonable spot. Okay, and that pretty much does this. So you can actually get away with making this drawing without any sectional views at all if you wanted to. And it's doable. Alright, that ends this video. Take care.